Hello.
Hello,
I believe that we're
everyone.
live. Welcome if you've arrived.
Here we are again.
Here we are again on Jnanavaca. This is
I'm
Maitreyabandhu, and we're well. Hopefully, you've been following this particular story that we've been telling. Very nice that you've come, and if you're here for the first time, welcome to you particularly. So it might be nice to see who's here. Maybe we should say who's here in the room with us.
I was thinking that, yeah.
So
Harvey from Deptford.
Harvey, hooray!
Hi to Harvey.
Richie's
hello,
here.
Richie,
Welcome, Richie. That's nice.
You're with your mother. That's good.
Luke Maxfield.
Hello, Luke.
Hello.
Nina Nutilla.
From New York? Is that Nina from New York?
No, from Greenwich.
All from Greenwich.
Adriana.
Welcome, Adriana.
Adriana.
And Kevin Delaney.
Kevin.
Lee on C.
Oh yeah, Kevin.
And
hello,
Richard from over the road.
Richard from over the road. Hello there, Richard
Richard.
from over the road.
Maggie
That's right.
from Stoke Newington.
You could almost
Maggie,
look
hello,
down
Maggie.
from the Canary Dwarf and look through the window from over the road.
No, he doesn't mean over. Does he mean right over the road? I don't know.
Yeah, that's where he lives.
Unspecified.
I think that's where he lives, yeah. So let's introduce the two of you as well.
Yes. So come.
So these are
So
our
we've
tech
got
team.
Seb and Matt with us this evening.
We live with them upstairs.
Matt's just doing his hair.
Yeah. We've all got lockdown hair.
Yep. Particularly Seb and Matt.
Yeah, and me actually.
Yep. So that's very good. Welcome all of you.
Welcome everyone.
Yeah,
really
nice
good
to
to have you
be
back.
here. I hope you're all well, and I hope well physically and well with lockdown, and that it's not being particularly difficult this week. We're both well, I think. Yeah. Okay, so as usual, what we'll do in a moment, I'll formally sort of begin. Actually, it's time, isn't
Yeah,
it?
we can
Okay, so yeah, welcome if you've just arrived. So I'm Jnanavaca, this is Maitreyabandhu. And so this week, as we've been doing for the last number of weeks, I don't know how many weeks we've been doing this, we're going to be carrying on with parables from the White Lotus Sutra. I'm holding up Bhante Sangratchata's commentary on the White Lotus Sutra, which is called The Drama of Cosmic Enlightenment. And Maitreyabandhu there was holding up a translation of the White Lotus Sutra. It's a Sanskrit late Mahayana text that is very, very influential in late Buddhism. And as part of that sutra, there's stories, and we've been exploring several stories. And tonight we're going to be continuing to explore this myth of the return journey. So I'm going to do a brief recap for just a few minutes, and then we'll meditate just for 10 minutes or so. So it will just be a settling into meditation. Now I'm going to hand over to Maitreyabandhu, who'll continue with the story. There's quite a bit to go, actually, so I don't know how far we'll get. But Maitreyabandhu will continue with the story. Then we'll have some time at the end, towards the end, for some questions. So if you have got questions, you can write them in the chat box. Yeah. So the myth of the return journey, it's a bit like the myth of the prodigal son. We're told that once upon a time, this young man, this son, maybe a boy, it becomes estranged from his home, from his family. He wanders away. And as Maitreyabandhu has been pointing out, that this sort of once upon a time starting point, and the fact that we're not told how and why it happened, seems to indicate that it's outside of time, that this estrangement from his family, and in particular what's mentioned is his father, isn't in time. And of course, this son is us as unenlightened beings, regardless of our gender. It's us. And the father, well, we've been exploring the father as the Buddha, but we've also been exploring him as, in a way, our higher self. That's what Bhante...
To use that language,
poetic sort of notion. Buddhism doesn't take language literally.
Yeah.
So poetically, it's as if there's an aspect of our minds, an aspect of us that is in touch with the nature of enlightenment, is in touch with the nature of reality. But we've become estranged from that aspect of our own selves. And it's as if we've forgotten. It's as if we've forgotten who we really are. So we've told us who we really are. And I was reflecting that enlightenment isn't, it's said not to be in time and space. So if we were to experience enlightened consciousness, it would be as if we had stepped outside of time and space. And at least in that sort of time and space as we normally literally kind of conceive of it. And so this is pointing to our true potential as being beyond time. And I was reflecting that if something's beyond time, if you're trying to talk about it in a story which is happening in time, you can either say that enlightenment was in the past and we've forgotten.
A long, long time ago.
A long, long time ago. That's, the past is one, as it were, metaphor for the timeless realm. Or you can say enlightenment is some long time in the future, and that we need to move towards enlightenment by practicing the path, and that one day, we'll become enlightened. Or you could say that we're already really enlightened if we but knew it. And Buddhism, in different phases and different schools, uses all three of those metaphors, and they are only metaphors. None of them is the actual truth, because the actual truth can't be grasped in concepts. But stories are a really good way of pointing to something that is beyond concepts, because if we allow the story to sink in, it affects us at a level that is deeper than our conscious mind. It can stir something in our depths. Anyway, the son has wandered off. Meanwhile, his father has become really wealthy, very, very wealthy. And a symbol, of course, for material wealth here being a symbol for spiritual riches. And the son comes across his wealthy father without knowing that it's his father. He doesn't recognize him. There's such an estrangement that there's no recognition on the son's part of his father, of his higher self, of the Buddha. And but the father does recognize him. It's like the Buddha doesn't forget us, and sends after his son, who runs away, is frightened. Fear, we talked about fear, didn't we, as a response to seeing truth, as a response to seeing how things are. If we're not prepared, if we haven't done our spiritual sort of training, the natural response is fear that somehow will be annihilated in the vastness of the spiritual truth. And
fear of implications on it.
The fear of
its implications.
Of its implications.
The implications of the truth.
With the truth. The son runs away. And his father sends after him somebody that's dressed in rags who offers him work. So the son is desperately poor, is looking for work, runs away to a poorer part of town. And we talked a little bit about the need for intermediaries. It's like the father can't approach him because there's too much of a gulf between the two, a spiritual gulf between the two. But what he does is he sends an intermediary, somebody also dressed in rags, in poor clothes. And he sends this man to say to his son, look, there's a job for you if you want a job. The wealthy man, the rich man, is offering you a job. He'll pay double the normal wages, and he'll look after you. And the son accepts. And the job, of course, turns out to be, there's this huge, huge pile of dirt, as it were, behind the mansion that the father lives in. And the job is shifting that dirt. shifting that dirt. And in the sutra, it's said to take years, like 20 years of shifting of dirt. So obviously the sutra is getting at, it knows that it's talking in metaphors. It's quite self-conscious in that way, isn't it, the
Yeah, yeah.
sutra? It knows that it's talking in metaphors. And in a way, that's where we got to, that the son, he accepts this job and he starts to shift the dirt. And we talked a little bit about, well, I started to talk a little bit about service. The important, we can't necessarily jump from where we are to enlightenment. I think the gulf is too great. We wouldn't be able to handle it if we did meet a Buddha. But what we can do is serve the ideal. That's certainly what I feel a resonance with, that I can, in my own limited way, serve the ideal. And service implies a degree of overcoming egotism, because you have to lay down egotistical kind of ambition and status, and you just serve. Certainly that's what we try and do for everybody working here at the Buddhist Centre, the London Buddhist Centre. We try and very consciously think in terms not so much of working and being employed and having jobs, and so much as serving, of doing whatever needs to be done, which I think is a spiritual practice that we can all undertake, and it is a transformative practice. And certainly for the son, it begins to transform him. Maitreyabandhu will say more about that later. So that's where we've got to. This encounter that is now, it's like the sun's moving closer through service. Yeah. Okay, very good. So what we'd do now, if you'd like to settle into a comfortable posture, see if you can have your feet flat on the ground if you're sitting on a chair. Make sure that you're upright. You might want to dim the lights, or you might just want to sit in front of your shrine.
Dim the screen lights.
We'll dim the lights here. Yes, you might want to dim the screen lights, or even look away from the screen. And then when you're ready, allowing your eyes to close. And taking a moment to notice any sounds around you. The sound of my voice, but also any other sounds you can hear. And having a sense of letting the eyes just rest in their sockets. Not straining to see anything. And feeling the contact of the seat under you. Your sitting bones rooting you to the seat. And the contact your body makes with the ground. If you want to, you could imagine that you're like a great tree that's rooted into the earth. See if you can feel those roots growing deeper and deeper into the earth. Rooting you to the ground. And if there's tension in the body or areas of the body that feel tight, if there's holding on or clenching in the muscles, imagining that just melting away down through the roots of the tree into the ground. Particularly with each out breath, that sense of any tightness melting away. And the legs becoming heavy and soft. And having a sense of the upper body rising up like the trunk of the tree, the trunk and the branches lifted up, reaching for the sky. Seeing if you can sense the slight lift from the crown of your head. So a sense of the body poised between the earth and the sky. And softening the face. The jaw. And looking for a sense of openness in the throat and in the chest. Even a sense of spaciousness. And the shoulders can sink down, fall away, but the chest can be open. Noticing the rise and fall of the abdomen as you breathe. And having a sense that the breath soothes you as it flows through. following the sensations of the breath with your awareness. And noticing how you feel in your heart, both the heart center in the center of your chest, but also your general mood and emotional tone. And then allowing your awareness to broaden again, the whole of your body, your surroundings. And when you feel ready, opening your eyes. Coming out of the meditation. Good. Okay, so when you're sitting comfortably, I'm going to hand over back to Maitreyabandhu, or over to Maitreyabandhu, to continue with the parable.
Yes, thank you, Jnanavaca. I'm not sure how much farther I'll manage to get with the parable, because the more I think about the parable, and any of these parables from the White Lotus Sutra, the deeper they seem, and then the more each image, you want to keep going into in each image again and again. But I did want to go back to this great matter of this great mound of earth, which of course could also be excrement, couldn't it? It doesn't need to be something quite so polite as earth. But it's interesting, isn't it? It's at the back of the mansion. So it's near the mansion. The man himself, the young man, the son, is living in a grass hovel, it said, at the back of the mansion. You know, all you need to do is turn over the metaphors of that, don't you? But so what's happened is he's been given a job, hasn't he? They've said, actually, we'll give you this good job, and actually we'll pay you well, and here's a place to live, and here's something to do. Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to draw from that, and I will take us a bit further into the story, but
Good.
is what happens is he's given a context. That the son is given a context in which to grow. So I was very struck by that, rethinking the parable, because especially with this online medium, it's very easy to think that Buddhism is a set of handy tips. That what you're going to get from Buddhist teaching is people like Jnanavaca and I telling you stuff about what you should do with your relationships, with your meditation, with your study, and so on. And there's a place for that. And I don't think it'll take you that far. There's masses of YouTube films like this in which people like Jnanavaca and I are teaching Buddhism or teaching how to live, what to do about unhappiness, how to work with stress, the difficult times at the moment, how to work with loneliness, and so on. All valuable stuff, I'm sure, but I'm sure you've tried it. I've tried it, and sometimes you try it for a bit, you use your willpower, you actually know what's in your interest, and you try and do it with your best intentions, and then your best intentions wear out. And you revert, in whatever way you do it. So what strikes me about the parable is it's not that the king sends a courtier, humble person and to teach him things. He sends him and gives him a context to grow. Yeah, place to live, a job, a reasonable amount of money. Obviously, and sort of virtually behind, a positive place. He's got a mansion in front of him. He's inside that gated place that he saw right at the start. So what he's been given is a place in which he can grow, a context that can bring out the best in him. And for most people, I would say that's much more important than any amount of valuable advice or teachings. Is most people, they need a context, an environment in which the good is drawn out of them, and the more difficult, the recalcitrant elements of the person, we've all got them, is not encouraged. So in this case, that's symbolized by, I'll give you reasonable money so you won't be desperate. I'll give you a job to do so you're occupied. I'll give you a place to live, not a great place, but somewhere you can call your own. I've give them a whole context in which he can start to thrive. And for most of us, what we need most to grow is a context in which we can be ourselves, in which we can tell the truth, in which we can agree and disagree with people. I'm very struck by, all this discussion and concern and protest around Black Lives Matter, for instance. And, I've got friends who've got different opinions about that. Can we have a context in which you can have different opinions about that and people can find out what they think that's a very difficult area, but how can we have a context in which people can actually discover their own thinking by thinking out loud, agreeing, disagreeing, saying, I'm not sure, this is not how I experience things. It's very easy in any context, isn't it, to start to close down on some of them and allow others. For me, when I first came to the London Buddhist Centre, I think one of the main things that I really valued was a context in which I could tell the truth, a context in which I could tell the truth about myself. There were lots of things I wasn't willing to reveal about myself. And I was suddenly surrounded with people who wanted to know who I really was and what I really thought, and was encouraging me to do that, not just relating to me as anyway, whatever. But so that's the first thing that I get from this, is that the Buddha doesn't send teachers. He sends somebody with a job and a place to live and a context. And what we need, all of us, and that's even more so now because we're in this lockdown situation where many of us have had our context taken away from us and we're just in our room or in our place. What we need is a context. And of course, the context is not only a place, but a people in which you can start that difficult business of learning how to think, learning how to feel, learning how to love without being sentimental, learning how to tell the truth without being harsh, learning to empathize with people whilst at the same time saying what you think, learning not to fall into ideologies, pros and cons, and so on. In other words, to fulfill your human potential. But for that, you need a context. Very, very difficult to do it on your own. And you tend to, if you try to do it on your own, do it in an embattled and rather unhelpful way, because that you need a whole range of people to give you a range of perspectives on life and on yourself. So that's the first thing that struck me.
Sangha, isn't it?
It's
That's partly
Sangha,
what
really.
Sangha's doing.
A spiritual community, a place in which you can start to discover yourself, and that discovery is in relationship with other people, where you're trying to bring the best out of yourself. And the best isn't always the nicest. It's the genuinely, the truthful, the courageous, the integral. Yeah. So that was one thing that occurred to me rethinking about it. And then, of course, there's this great big heap of dirt, and well, I mean, that you couldn't have a better image, that even though what is given to him is a context, a place, a people, all these courtiers about, and servants and king and the king, even though he's given a sort of community in which he's in. He's no longer a vagabond going from one poor place to another, which very often the lone individual, that is what they're doing. They're just sort of going from one poor place to another. Even though he's given all that, that's not going to do the work. He has to do the work on his own mind. He's given that context, in fact, so he can do the work on his own mind. The job is his. There's no ambiguity about that in the sutra. There's a pile of dirt, and you need to move it. It's not even you need to organize with people to move it. It's not, if you do well at this, you can get somebody else to move that. It's not. It's just really clear. This is your job to move that dirt. And isn't that a wonderful metaphor for ourselves, that if we're honest with ourselves, there is a lot of dirt in ourselves, in the sense of, I mean, dirt is wonderful stuff, remember. There's a saying, a Zen saying, isn't it? The more mud, the bigger the Buddha. In other words, the dirt of being human is where the seed, is where Buddhahood grows from. It won't grow from anything else. But you won't grow if you close your eyes to the dirt in yourself. If you close your eyes to your own hatred, if you close your eyes to your own aggression, if you close your eyes to your own lust, to your own meanness, to your own self-importance, these aren't bad things. They're just human things. They're just being human. There's a lot of dirt. And the people that pretend there isn't usually say there's a lot of dirt outside of them. If you say, I haven't got it, you tend to find somebody who you think has it. And you see this, don't you, so much. You say, you want to be the righteous one. And you say, these unrighteous people, they've got this great big pile of dirt. Yeah. So Buddhism is quite unforgiving in this way. It won't let you do that, I don't think. It wants to say, no, you've got dirt. Have a look at that. You need to start shifting it. We're going to try and create a context for you to do that, but you need to do that work. You need to face stuff.
If you want to grow.
If you want to grow, yeah. If you don't want to grow,
it's fine too.
It's fine too, yeah. But if you want to grow spiritually, if you want to realize that you're the son of a king, then you've got dirt to move. Now, if you don't have that vision, like it's interesting, even this dirt moving, which on its own would be too tough a metaphor. Remember that it's the start of the story effectively was being the son being faced by a vision of splendor and his true nature, effectively, that I am the future king. I mean, he doesn't see it like that because he's so alienated from it. But in other words, the story starts with a vision of reality, a vision of riches. And he effectively, what happens is, to move towards that vision of riches, you have to do this work on yourself. You have to do the work. But I do think that means getting your hands dirty. Literally, there's no way of shifting dirt without getting your hands dirty. The Dharma life, the spiritual life, if you live it with any integrity and truthfulness, it will involve getting your hands dirty. You will get into difficulties with people and conflict with people. You will disagree. You will need to forgive. You will need to apologize. You will need to criticize sometimes. And all that's a bit dirty. It's a bit messy. Do you see how it's much easier for us just to give you some sort of little teachings that you can take home and everything stays clean? I personally don't. I think that's a fantasy. I think if you really want to move towards the riches of enlightenment, you will need to get your hands dirty. You will need to change yourself, and that means facing up to the recalcitrant elements of yourself. It means also, remember, I'll go on the story a minute more, but it means all of those dirty things, yeah? You can't get anywhere with closing your eye to them. But remember that whilst you're doing that, this is difficult, isn't it? But to remember whilst you're doing that, you're behind a mansion. You're in this context of the mansion. Do you see how it's easy to either over-egg the mansion or over-egg the dirt? If you over-egg the dirt, you start into this terrible, what can become, and I've done it in my life, a kind of indulgent dramatization of your own trauma and pain and unhappiness. And I've been rather prone to that. So if you over-egg the dirt, that's what you get to. If you over-egg the mansion, you close your eyes to the dirt. And usually you say other people have got the dirt and they're the problem. And you see history strewn with that sort of thing. So somehow you've got, I mean, the metaphor of this sutra is perfect. You've got this incredible context and you've got dirt. And you've got the both, yeah? And it's made even more explicit because in the parable, it's said that the king himself, this image of the Buddha of richness, he can see the man clearing the dirt from his window. So he looks at him. You feel sometimes the sun can't see him, or perhaps he occasionally glances up at the window. Reminds me of, what's that film, American film, with DiCaprio in, from the novel. It'll come back. The Great Gatsby. That's what happens. There's a very rich man next door, and he occasionally looks through the window, doesn't he? He glances up. So occasionally he might glance up at that, but even though it feels like you're involved in dirt, actually someone else, the king in this image, is looking at you, presumably with great compassion. But also, he's not going to take it away from you. You yourself have to do the work. In the earliest Pali Sutras, it says, by you must the zealous effort be made. The Buddhas only point the way. In other words, it's that the earlier sutras are much stronger like that. They say, no, you need to make the effort. We can indicate. Actually, I think it's still not enough. I think you need these parables of the White Lotus Sutra. In some ways, for me, they're more suggestive and in a certain sense, more accurate. Because it's too easy to think, oh yeah, it's all dirt moving. And that's not good for you. And it's not good for me. I've tried it, so it's not good for me. Jnanavaca has not been prone to that. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's done his own things. Yeah. So it wasn't the next stage of the sutra I want to draw out, though, is that the king sort of sees him and he works. He does the work. That's all you can ask of someone. You can't ask them to be perfect. You can't ask them, I don't know, not to get into bad moods. You can't ask them not to be themselves. So often when we criticize people, I think what we're doing effectively is saying it would be good if you were someone else. If someone's emotionally cool, you say it would be good if you were really warm. If someone's very chatty, you say it'd be good if you were really quiet. All we can ask of ourselves and of each other is to do the work. Is to say, look, I'm really sorry, I made a mistake there. Is to say, I took offense there. Is to say, I gave offense there. Is to say, actually, do you know what? Let's not polarize about that. Let's try and think together. I think this, you think that, but let's not us get into a standoff about it. That's not going to help the world. It's not going to help anyone. Let's not do that. That's the work, yeah? And that's how you find meaning in life. We were talking about meaning in and meaning of life, but how you find meaning in life is just doing that work. It's very unsexy. That's what the mind of soil is about. It's very unsexy, everyday work. Turning up to your meditation, turning up to your feelings, trying to be courageous, trying to be generous, trying to be kind when you feel mean, and so on. Yeah, that's the work. And the king watches him, and you can imagine in this story the king watching him, seeing him doing the work. That's all that you need to see in someone. Sometimes you can see that immediately. Some of my friends that I know, as soon as you see them doing the work, when they just say, look, I'm a bit like this, you think, oh, I like you immediately. It's not just one way. As soon as someone's honest, or especially if they're honest and open about themselves, you immediately feel attracted to them. You immediately think, you're all right, you're fine, because you're doing the work.
You don't have to be perfect.
You don't have to be perfect.
You don't have to be sorted out, do you?
Not at all.
You can be messy.
But you need to be honest about that and revealing about that and non-blaming about that. This is the place I'm in. And as soon as you do that, love is all around you, in my experience. There's love everywhere for all of us. All we need to do is say, do you know what? I'm getting into a bit of a strum-out about this, and I'm sorry about that, and can I help in some way? Love is there for you. I've seen it in my own life, and I've seen it in the lives of my friends. And I think that's what happens in the sutta. The drama of the sutta is that the king sees him doing that and is drawn to him because he's doing the work. So what happens is he goes to his son, but he knows that he can't appear to his son as a great king. So he dresses in humble clothes. He dresses as an ordinary poor person, and he goes to talk to the son. And he says, I've been watching you work. You're a good worker. You're a good worker. You're doing an honest day's work. You're honest. You're not shirking your job. I see you working. I see you doing it well. I see you living. You're doing all right. You're a good man. He even says, not like some of the people I've employed who just sort of try and do as little work as they possibly can and try and get other people to work for them, try and blame other people on the fact they're not doing much work. You're not that kind of guy. You're genuinely doing the work. And so he says, I really feel something for that. I want to help you. So if you want anything, if you need anything, you might need a bowl or I've got a cloak you could have, I've got stuff. If you need stuff, you can ask me. That's what he says. And in fact, he said, I'm much older than you. And actually, I haven't got any children of my own. So you can just treat me like your father. Yeah. Isn't that wonderful? That as soon as you do the work, reality, it's saying, moves towards you, puts on clothes that you will recognize, and says, do you want stuff? Do you want to help in any way? And what the king does, disguised as a pauper in this part of the parable, what he does is he encourages him. He basically says, I see you working, I see you're honest, I see you mean well, I see you trying, perhaps not even your best, but I see you trying. I'll help if I can. Yeah, he just encourages him. He says, you're a moral person. You are honest. You are trying your best. You're fine. That's what he says to him. In fact, you're good. You're better than some of the people we've had. You're not blaming other people. You're not saying, actually, I did all that work and so ruined it. You're fine. That's what he does. Yeah. And just to finish, what I'm struck by again is that incredible mystical thing of a king dressed as a pauper. You see it in every fairy tale. Either a king or a god or an angel comes down to earth, puts on the clothes of everyday life, and talks to you in the marketplace or near a heap of dirt. So I think what that might say, I think that's a mystical image. It's just striking that it so often occurs in parables, fairy stories, myths. The god coming down to us dressed as an ordinary person, the king going amongst the marketplace and nobody recognizing him. So I think that's saying is if you relate to the commonplace, if you relate to that from a certain perspective, it's the king. It's reality. It's unbelievable riches. Now that's a very, very difficult lesson to learn. But so many fairy tales are trying to get at that. But if you could relate to the commonplace from a more creative, deeper place, that appearance of the commonplace would be a place of great riches, would be everything you want, would be reality itself. Because, of course, reality is in everything. It's not in the king, it's not in the money, it's not in the mansion, it's in the dirt, it's in your work. Reality is in everything. So that's why I think, and that's one way of reading, perhaps, the king's appearance, dressed as a pauper, such a common mythic figure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Maitreyabandhu. You've really packed quite a lot in there, and it'd be good now to see if there are any questions. There might be questions, or it might just be comments, or you might just have an area or an image or a theme that resonates with you, and you'd like us to talk about it a bit more. So, so if there are any of those, then yeah, just put it in the chat, and if there aren't, that's fine too. We'll carry on talking.
We can carry on talking about it.
There's so much here even just in what you've just said,
Mm.
just at the last bit about this reality being in the commonplace, in everything.
Mm.
There's a lot to explore, even in that. So
Sounds
shall
like we've got one
Yeah,
question.
we've got
at
one
least,
question.
so, yeah.
Matt, do you want to read out the question?
A question from Will. He says, do you have any advice for unskillful behaviours like drinking alcohol? He says he's had a tough week and has drunk a lot, but feels disappointment in himself for this. And the more he meditates, the worse he feels about his slip-ups.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you,
Will.
Will,
Thanks for being so honest.
Yeah, that's right. In a way,
Really
that's
lovely,
already
actually.
the beginning.
That is the work.
Yeah, that is the work, isn't it? Oh, yeah. So the question is, what do you do about the unskillful? I don't know whether you heard it, but perhaps let's somehow fold in the question to the answer.
So I think there is something about when we start to meditate, or the more we meditate, the more our unskillful behavior shows up.
Yeah.
And the more uncomfortable it becomes. And that's a good thing. It might not be very pleasant, but it is a good thing. It means that we're getting in touch with, we're refining our conscience, and we're getting in touch with a finer sensibility and finer ethical sensibility that has a higher ideal for ourselves than perhaps we've had in the past. So I think that's a really good thing. And then the tension comes in, okay, but I'm not always able to live up to that ideal.
Yeah.
And then that creates this discomfort, which, as I say, is like a tension. And it's in that tension that growth can happen. So you might not be able to, say, right, I'm not going to drink again and then keep to that. You might not be able to do that all in one go. Or you might. Some people are able to, aren't they? But what you sort of, if you're not able to do that all in one go, it's sort of important to navigate this terrain of training yourself, weaning yourself off of unskillfulness, at the same time being not so
not too much on your own case.
Yeah, not too much on your own case. Like you're trying to grow, you're trying to change, and we start from where we are. The important thing seems to be the direction that we're moving in, the growth, the effort. And if you keep falling short, well, I do. I keep falling short of the ideals that I hold. I keep acknowledging that, and I keep acknowledging it to my friends. I keep confessing that and say, here I go again. I've tried to practice, but I keep falling short.
It's interesting as well, isn't it, in that little story, because one of the things that helps you not drink, for instance, is being around people who don't drink.
Yeah, context again.
It's again context. You know what it's like. You can go to a pub, decide absolutely I'm not going to drink. You've got a whole friend who are all drinking, and it's really, really difficult not to drink. Our behaviour is infectious, isn't it? So again, it's context.
And context is really important, or friendship is really important again, because I think for different people, the issues are sometimes different. So if somebody was coming to me and they were trying to give up their drink, and they were drinking to such excess that it was damaging them and all their relationships and their life around them, then you probably have to sort of say, no, look, you've got to be really firm.
Yeah.
If somebody was drinking occasionally, it wasn't particularly damaging their life, but they had an ideal of sobriety, then that you might tackle it in a different way. Or you might say to somebody, look, the occasional drink, that's not the main thing you need to worry about. The main thing is your anger and how one is harsh with people.
Yeah.
That causes more damage in your case. I mean, I'm not saying you will, in one's case, than the occasional. So it's very individual when we're working with our ethics. So general principles, and then
that's why you need friends who know you very well and can say, well, actually, I don't think that is so much of an issue, but I do think this is an issue. Sometimes what looks small is a bigger issue. What looks big is, don't worry about that too much at the moment. Look, we better move on because we've got some other questions, but a really good question.
So I'm going to put the two together. Sort of the same. So Aaron asks, what if you're not confident the work will work? And Carl has also asked, will you attain a clear sense that the work is working?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, very good questions. Very good questions.
Because there's doubt, isn't there? Well, there's room for doubt as well, in that it's not obvious that from where we are that it will work.
No, it's
when we
not.
start, it isn't really obvious. So you have to you're sort of taking things on trust a bit, aren't you? I think.
Yes, but I think if the question is about how do you know the work will work? I think, for instance, if you're honest, very often you will feel relief. If you're generous, if you're sensitive to yourself, you'll feel a bit better. I remember I used to feel very prone to, well, I still am a bit prone to depression. And I remember one day having this terribly depressed day, and that I just did something that was generous in it. And for the moment I was generous, it sort of lifted for a moment. As soon as I stopped being generous, it went back down again. I think as you get more sensitive, you do start to feel like, oh, I feel a bit more expansive now. Even in admitting something, confessing something, it's painful, but you do feel a bit more, oh, at last, I'm alive again. I'm in touch with people again. I think it takes time, but you start to feel that the work is working in that sense of relief, in that sense of connection, in that sense of meaning, even if it's not comfortable. I don't know, but that's one of the things.
That's right. I think you try it and then you test it. And if you keep practicing, you'll see that it works.
Yeah.
Not in the ways that you sometimes think, because I think sometimes we assume that practicing Buddhism is just going to make us happier. And it can make you happier. In a way, it should make you happier. But life doesn't always work out just because you're a Buddhist. We're still prone to life being painful. What it does is it gives you a sense of fulfillment, a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, a sense of well-being at a deeper level than just happiness.
Yeah.
So that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. And the direction of travel is so important.
And connection with other people, connection with the world around you, with life, really.
We've got some other questions, I think, as well.
Yes, so Oliver has asked, why is it not good for us to do too much shoveling of our own dirt?
Well, I mean, why is it not good for us to do too much shoveling our own dirt? Because one becomes, what I mean by that, in my own experience anyway, is, and this is slightly subtle to get across and it's easy to misunderstand, but then so much is, that if you're not careful, you can get slightly sort of, you can romanticize your own dirt. You can get slightly attached to it, even identified with it. I did that very much. I came to Buddhism, I was very, very unhappy, rather depressive. And if I wasn't careful, I started to think that was somehow deep, that it gave me kind of a sort of kudos, strangely. You can start to be beguiled by your own darker side and think that shows that you've got integrity, it's got depth, it's got grit. And it's not completely untrue. It's just that it's very edited. It forgets the mansion, it forgets the king watching you. And I have done that, so I can speak from experience, and it definitely made me more unhappy. It made me, I tended to over-identify with my own shortcomings, my own negativities, and I still have that habit. It's a quite deep habit for me. So I've tried it for quite a long time, and it really doesn't, it's not in your interests. It's difficult to get the balance right between honoring it. It exists, that's how it is, that's how I feel, that's true, and this did happen, and this is what it's left me with, but not identifying with it. At the very least, not over-identifying with it. Because when you do that, when I do that, I forget all the love that's around me, all the things I have to be grateful for, all the gifts I'm in receipt of. And I can fall into that typology, sort of not honoring those difficulties, but rather identifying with them to the detriment of things like joy and love and the positive in life. You can start to even naysay those things. That's what I was getting at.
It's a modern psychotherapeutic view, isn't it?
Yeah.
That I'm sort of caricaturing, but that, as you say, that meaning and real depth is to be found in the dirt,
Yes, that's
in
right.
the darker, in the painful.
Yeah, that's where reality is.
That's
even.
where reality is, and while not wanting to dismiss that, because there can be truth in that, and that the parable's sort of illustrating some truth, it's not the whole truth. And what I find interesting is that the son could, at any moment, wake up to the fact that he's the son of a king.
Mm.
That's also true. In fact, that's the larger truth.
Yes, yeah.
And it's only because he doesn't see that positive, that great positive that's always there, that he has to spend 20 years in the dirt.
Yes, that's
You
right.
could say another parable could be that he just suddenly woke up one morning and realized he was the son of a of the wealthy man.
Yeah,
That potential exists.
that's right. And that remember that the whole reason to dig the dirt is because of a vision of absolute riches.
Because the dirt's endless, isn't it?
Yeah, if you get into dirt, you never get to the bottom of it. My friends tease me about my traumatic childhood, which actually wasn't that traumatic, but I go on about it a lot. But if you try and keep on getting into that, it's kind of endless in my experience. You can never get to the first cause that made you unhappy in your own story. And there is work to do. I've also met people who won't face up to the issues of themselves, and that's very unhealthy. If you won't say, actually, this is what happened, and this is where it's left me. You sometimes meet people who are being very positive at you in a way that you feel is kind of fractured and unreal. I don't think that's healthy. I really don't.
There's also spiritual bypassing.
Oh yeah,
where one can get very, I've done this, get very inspired by the ideal, and then somehow leave out all the difficult stuff that needs to be worked on.
Yeah.
You can do that in meditation sometimes. You can sort of jump over yourself and actually not realize that, look, I've got some hatred or craving or ill will or whatever it is that I need to work on, resentment that I need to work on.
Yeah.
So I think that's possible. You can go either way with this. And it's very, very difficult to know when you're going off course. Again, it's easier sometimes for other people to see it rather than to see it for oneself.
And isn't it interesting that you need a parable to tell you, because you can't have a rule.
Right. Yeah.
You need a parable that you can read this way and you can read that way, and you can you remember this, but you remember part of the parable is that. Do you see how parable is trying to say everything at the same time?
Yeah.
It's very striking, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So I think we should probably start wrapping up.
To wrap up. And then we haven't been able to answer all your questions. You've got something else to say?
No, not really. But I think what I think you've said today that really has resonated with me is the need for context, and that context includes people. And we've kept coming back to the trickiness of the Dharma life, the trickiness of the path. And really, we need people to help us navigate that terrain. It's full of pitfalls. It's not risk-free by any means.
No.
And that's why, I feel very grateful that in Triratna we've got a Sangha. Do you see? We've got like Bhante Sangharachita, he's no longer alive, but we have got a Sangha of people who have been practicing. And some of them, might have practiced a lot longer, and some of them are just a little bit more advanced than we are. And we need that. We need the context of friendship in order to grow.
Indeed.
Okay, so we're going to leave it there for this week. So hopefully see you again next week. We're going to carry on. The parable still has a way to go.
We haven't got very far.
No, we haven't got very far. It's got a way to go. We're getting there. And once again, to say that thank you very, very much if you've been giving money to the London Buddhist Centre. I just want to encourage you to keep giving. We really could do with the money. And I know that lots of people could do with money at the moment. So in a way, you don't have to give. Don't feel that you have to give anything. We want to offer freely. The culture that we have at the London Buddhist Centre and that we're trying to make sure that we don't lose sight of is one of generosity. So we want to give freely, and we want to encourage you to give freely if you want to. But just to reassure you that if you do, the money will definitely be put to good use. We need the money to keep spreading the Dharma in the way that we have been doing. So I want us to finish once again with the transference of merit and self-surrender in call and response, to really remind ourselves that we practice for the sake of others, in fact, for the sake of all beings. So once again, just settling into a comfortable posture. Transference of merit and self-surrender. May the merit gained
May the merit gained
in my acting thus
in my acting thus
go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings.
go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings.
My personality throughout my existences.
My personality throughout my existence.
My possessions.
My possessions.
And my merit in all three ways.
And my merit in all three ways.
I give up without regard to myself.
I give up without regard to myself.
For the benefit of all beings.
For the benefit of all beings.
Just as the earth and other elements.
Just as the earth and other elements.
Are serviceable in many ways.
Are serviceable in many ways.
To the infinite number of beings.
To the infinite number of beings.
Inhabiting limitless space.
Inhabiting limitless space.
So may I become.
So may I become.
That which maintains all beings.
That which maintains all beings.
Situated throughout space.
Situated throughout space.
So long as all have not attained.
So long as all have not attained.
To peace.
To peace.
Good night, and hopefully see you very soon. See you next week, if not before.
Yeah, good night, everyone.
Good night.